$2 million. Those were the words that changed everything. Sarah's best friend since childhood had just asked her to have his baby. Marcus Thompson, the boy who used to share his lunch with her, was now offering her more money than she'd ever seen in her life. 20 years ago, they were just two kids who promised to be friends forever. Now he was asking her to carry his child. "I need an heir, Sarah. The board won't respect me without one. You're the only person I trust with this." "Marcus, what are you saying? You want me to have your baby? Like some kind of business transaction?" "It would be through IVF, completely professional. You'd be helping me save everything my family built." Sarah thought about her father's medical bills, her student loans, the eviction notice sitting on her kitchen table. "Think about it, Sarah. $2 million. You could quit teaching, take care of your dad properly. And after 9 months, I just hand over the baby and walk away. Pretend it never happened. You would always be part of our lives. The child would know you're special to us." There was something in his eyes when he said special that made Sarah's heart skip. But this was Marcus, her best friend, not. "I've had my lawyers draw up a contract. Everything would be handled professionally, medically supervised." Sarah stared at the contract that could solve all her problems. But would it create bigger ones? "I know it sounds crazy, Sarah, but I can't think of anyone else I'd want to be the mother of my child." The way he said, "mother of my child," sent shivers down Sarah's spine. This felt like more than business. "My grandmother always said you were the perfect woman." Maybe she was right about more than I realized. His grandmother's words echoed in Sarah's mind. Had there always been something more between them that she was too blind to see? Take your time to think about it. "But Sarah, you would be saving my entire future." As Sarah walked toward the door, she felt like she was walking toward a decision that would change everything forever. "Sarah," he called softly, "whatever you decide, you'll always be the most important person in my life." What would you do in Sarah's situation? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. That night, Sarah sat in her tiny kitchen staring at a mountain of bills that seemed to multiply every day like some cruel magic trick designed to torment her. The eviction notice felt heavier than ever in her trembling hands, the bold red letters screaming "Final Notice, 48 hours" at her with unforgiving clarity. Her father's medical expenses were drowning her slowly but surely, each new bill adding another stone to the weight crushing her chest. Her teacher's salary barely covered groceries anymore, let alone rent, utilities, or any semblance of a normal life. Marcus's shocking offer kept echoing in her mind like a lifeline she was both desperate to grab and terrified to touch. $2 million could solve everything instantly, but at what cost to her soul? "Sarah, you look absolutely terrible," her sister Emma said as she walked through the door without knocking, immediately noticing Sarah's distress and the chaos of paperwork surrounding her. "What's wrong now?" "Another medical bill." Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell her about Marcus's shocking proposal. Not yet, maybe not ever. How could she explain that her childhood best friend had just offered her $2 million to carry his child? Her hands shook uncontrollably as she showed Emma the latest medical bill from their father's experimental cancer treatment. $15,000 for this month alone, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking with the overwhelming weight of their impossible financial situation that seemed to grow worse every single day. Emma's face went completely pale as she read the astronomical numbers that represented their father's desperate fight for life against an enemy they couldn't defeat. "Sarah, we can't keep this up much longer without destroying ourselves financially and emotionally. Dad's insurance won't cover the experimental treatment anymore, and we're already drowning in debt that keeps growing every single day." The crushing weight of responsibility pressed down on Sarah's chest like a physical force, making it increasingly difficult to breathe or think clearly. As the older sister, she'd always been the one to fix everything, to find miraculous solutions when there seemed to be none. But this time, she was failing spectacularly, and everyone was counting on her to save the day somehow. Sarah's exhausted mind drifted to precious childhood memories with Marcus, when life was beautifully simple and problems could be solved with ice cream and unconditional friendship that felt eternal. They'd race through the quiet neighborhood on endless summer afternoons, making innocent promises to always be there for each other no matter what life threw their way. "When we grow up, I'll help you with everything, Sarah. I promise I'll always take care of you," little Marcus had declared with the unwavering confidence only children possess. Sarah never could have imagined in her wildest dreams that it would come to this impossible, life-altering situation that challenged everything she believed about friendship and morality. She remembered that magical summer when his wealthy family generously took her on vacation to the exclusive Hamptons because her parents couldn't afford a trip anywhere beyond their small town. Marcus had insisted she come along, absolutely refusing to go without his best friend by his side, even when his parents suggested it might be awkward. Even then, he was looking out for her with genuine care and protectiveness, making sure she never felt left out or different because of their family's vast financial differences. His kindness had always been completely genuine and selfless, which made his current shocking proposal even more confusing and emotionally devastating. Was this still the same protective love, or had it transformed into something else entirely? After Emma finally left with promises to help somehow that they both knew were impossible to keep, Sarah found herself researching IVF procedures online deep into the night, trying to understand what Marcus was actually asking of her beyond a shocking financial offer. The medical terminology felt foreign and intimidatingly clinical, but the process seemed straightforward enough for what she could understand through her exhausted research. Women did this every day for couples struggling with infertility, bringing hope and joy to families who desperately wanted children. But this wasn't about love or building a traditional family. This was about business, money, and her own crushing desperation. Could she really separate her emotions from something so inherently intimate and permanently life-changing? The next morning, after a sleepless night of endless contemplation, Sarah gathered every ounce of courage she possessed and called Marcus with shaking fingers. "Marcus," she said when he answered, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "I've thought extensively about your offer, and I want to move forward with this arrangement. But I absolutely need to understand every single detail of what we're agreeing to." His relief was palpable even through the phone. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll set up an appointment with Dr. Martinez immediately. She's the best fertility specialist in the city, and she'll explain everything." 3 days later, Sarah found herself sitting in Dr. Rebecca Martinez's pristine office, surrounded by medical charts and success stories that felt both hopeful and terrifying. Marcus sat beside her, his presence both comforting and overwhelming as they prepared to discuss something that would change their lives forever. "I understand this is an unusual situation," Dr. Martinez said with gentle professionalism, her kind eyes showing no judgment whatsoever. "But medically speaking, the process is very straightforward. We'll start with comprehensive health screenings for both of you, then begin hormone treatments to prepare your body for the embryo transfer." As Dr. Martinez explained the detailed medical procedures, the reality of what Sarah was agreeing to hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about her body, her health, and bringing a human life into the world under the most complicated circumstances imaginable. "The hormone injections will need to be administered daily for several weeks," the doctor continued, showing her syringes and medication that would become part of her daily routine. "There will be frequent monitoring appointments, blood tests, and ultrasounds to track your body's response." The clinical nature of it all made Sarah's head spin with the enormity of what lay ahead. As they left the clinic with appointment schedules and medication instructions, the weight of their decision settled over them like a heavy blanket. Marcus walked beside Sarah in thoughtful silence, both of them processing the reality that they were about to embark on a journey that would test every boundary of their friendship. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with concern and something else she couldn't quite identify. "Because once we start, there's no going back to the way things were before." Sarah looked at him, her oldest friend, and nodded with determination she didn't entirely feel. "I'm sure, Marcus. Let's do this." 2 weeks into the hormone treatments, Sarah's daily routine had become a careful dance of injections, medications, and medical appointments that consumed her every thought and dominated her life completely. Each morning, she stood in her tiny bathroom mirror, administering the hormone shots that would prepare her body for something she still couldn't fully comprehend or emotionally process. The medication made her unpredictably emotional, crying at random moments throughout the day over the smallest things. Marcus had been surprisingly attentive during this entire process, calling daily to check on her progress and any side effects she might be experiencing. His concern felt genuine and caring, but there was something deeper in his voice that made her question whether this was really just a business arrangement between old friends. "I brought your favorite coffee and those blueberry scones from Morrison's Bakery," Marcus said as he arrived at Sarah's apartment that morning, carrying bags from the expensive bakery across town that she'd mentioned loving years ago. Sarah stared at him in surprise, wondering how he remembered such a specific detail from a conversation they'd had during college. "Marcus, you don't need to bring me breakfast every day. This is supposed to be a professional arrangement, remember?" But he continued these thoughtful gestures, showing up with exactly what she needed before she even realized she needed it. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the emotional distance that a business relationship required. "How do you remember that I love Morrison's blueberry scones?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled by his attention to details that even she had forgotten about herself. "I mentioned that place maybe twice in college, and that was over 10 years ago." Marcus smiled with a warmth that made her heart skip in ways that terrified and confused her. "I remember everything you've ever told me, Sarah. Every conversation, every preference, every dream you've shared with me over the years." The way he said it, with such tender sincerity and focused attention, made her feel like she was the only person in the world who mattered to him. This level of attentiveness felt far too intimate for what they were supposed to be doing together. Later that morning, they sat together in Dr. Martinez's waiting room for Sarah's follow-up appointment, and Marcus reached over to hold her hand when he noticed her fidgeting nervously with her purse strap. "You don't have to be nervous, Sarah. Dr. Martinez said your body is responding perfectly to the treatment, and everything is going exactly according to plan." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm in a gesture that felt far too intimate and romantic for a business partner. Other couples in the waiting room smiled at them warmly, clearly assuming they were just another loving couple trying to start a family together. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Sarah, but Marcus seemed completely comfortable with the misconception. "Your hormone levels are exactly where we want them to be," Dr. Martinez explained with professional satisfaction as she reviewed Sarah's latest blood work results. "We'll be ready to proceed with the embryo transfer next week if everything continues progressing at this rate." Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand tighter, his excitement palpable and almost overwhelming in its intensity. "This is really happening," he whispered to her with genuine emotion that seemed far too deep for someone who was supposedly just hiring her for a service. The way he looked at her in that moment made Sarah's stomach flutter with feelings she wasn't supposed to be having about her best friend and business partner. "Well, isn't this a touching scene?" The familiar voice that cut through their moment like a knife belonged to Victoria Hartwell, who had somehow managed to walk directly into Dr. Martinez's private consultation room without permission or invitation. She looked absolutely stunning and completely out of place in the clinical setting, her designer outfit and perfect makeup radiating the kind of confidence that came from old money and ruthless determination. "Marcus, darling, I had no idea you were playing house with your little childhood friend." Her smile was cold and calculating, designed to make Sarah feel small and insignificant. Dr. Martinez looked completely bewildered by this unexpected intrusion into her professional environment. "Victoria, what the hell are you doing here?" Marcus immediately stood up, positioning himself protectively between her and Sarah in a way that surprised Sarah with its intensity and possessiveness. "This is a private medical appointment, and you have absolutely no right to be here disrupting Sarah's treatment." His voice carried an authority and anger Sarah had rarely heard from him, but Victoria just laughed with cruel amusement that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Private? How precious. I just wanted to meet the woman who's so desperate for money that she's willing to carry another woman's man's baby. The way she emphasized another woman's man made it clear she still considered Marcus her property, despite their broken engagement. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you?" Sarah asked quietly, though she already knew the answer from Marcus's obvious discomfort and the possessive way Victoria was looking at him. Victoria's cold smile widened with malicious satisfaction that made Sarah feel physically uncomfortable. "I'm Victoria Hartwell, Marcus's fiancée." "Well, former fiancée, but that's just a temporary setback that will be resolved very soon." She moved closer to Sarah's chair with predatory grace. "I'm sure Marcus failed to mention that we've been discussing reconciliation, haven't you, darling? It's amazing how quickly men come running back when they realize what they've lost." The venomous way she delivered this information made it clear she was trying to hurt and intimidate Sarah. Victoria leaned even closer to Sarah, her expensive perfume overwhelming and her voice dropping to a whisper that only Sarah could hear clearly. "Listen carefully, little teacher. Marcus and I have a history that goes back years, and we have a future that doesn't include you playing surrogate mother to our children. Whatever pathetic arrangement you think you have with him is temporary and meaningless." Her green eyes were cold as ice, filled with a hatred that seemed completely disproportionate to their situation. "I'd be very careful about getting too attached to this fantasy, because when Marcus comes back to me, and he will, you'll be left with nothing but a broken heart and a baby you can't afford to raise." The threat was delivered with such casual cruelty that it took Sarah's breath away. "That's enough, Victoria." Marcus firmly took her by the arm and began escorting her toward the door, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You need to leave immediately, and if you ever show up at Sarah's medical appointments again, I'll have security remove you and file a restraining order." Victoria allowed herself to be led away, but not before turning back to Sarah with one final, chilling smile. "Think about what I said, Sarah. Some things are worth more than money, and some battles you simply cannot win." As the door closed behind them, Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened and wondering if Victoria's threats were empty posturing or something much more dangerous and real. The first embryo transfer had failed, and the news hit Sarah harder than she had expected it would for what was supposed to be just a business arrangement. Dr. Martinez delivered the results with gentle professionalism, but Sarah could see the disappointment in her eyes as well. "These things happen more often than people realize," she explained softly. "It doesn't mean anything is wrong with either of you. Sometimes it just takes a few attempts before the embryo successfully implants." Sarah stared at the ceiling, feeling an unexpected sense of loss that she couldn't quite understand or explain. Was she grieving for a potential life that never had a chance to begin, or was she mourning something deeper about her relationship with Marcus that she wasn't ready to acknowledge? Marcus was devastated by the news, and his reaction was far more emotional than Sarah would have expected from someone who was supposedly treating this as a simple business transaction. He sat beside the examination table holding her hand tightly, his eyes filled with genuine tears that he tried unsuccessfully to hide from her. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know how hard you've worked to prepare your body for this, and I feel like I failed you somehow." His voice was thick with emotion, and the way he was looking at her, like she was the most precious thing in his world, made Sarah's heart ache with confusion. This level of investment and care felt far too intimate and personal for what they had originally agreed to do together. That evening, Marcus insisted on staying with Sarah instead of going home to his penthouse, claiming he didn't want her to be alone after receiving such disappointing news. They sat together on her small couch, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything except the failed procedure that hung between them like an unspoken weight. "You don't have to take care of me, Marcus," Sarah said softly, but he pulled her closer against his shoulder in a gesture that felt far too natural and comfortable for business partners. "I want to be here with you, Sarah. You shouldn't have to go through this alone." The way he said it, with such tender conviction, made her wonder if he was talking about more than just the medical procedures they were enduring together. As Sarah dozed against his shoulder, She felt Marcus gently stroking her hair in a rhythm that was both soothing and dangerously intimate for two people who were supposed to be maintaining professional boundaries. When she stirred and looked up at him, the expression in his eyes took her breath away. It was filled with a longing and tenderness that spoke of feelings far deeper than friendship or business partnership. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting and how his touch was making her heart race in ways she wasn't prepared to handle. "What are we really doing here?" He looked like he wanted to say something important, but instead he just smiled sadly and kissed the top of her head with heartbreaking gentleness. "We're trying to create something beautiful together, Sarah. That's all." A few days later, Victoria cornered Sarah outside the fertility clinic as she was leaving her hormone monitoring appointment, appearing suddenly like a predator that had been lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. "Sarah, I'm so glad I caught you alone. We need to have a little chat, woman to woman, about this ridiculous arrangement you have with Marcus." Her smile was cold and calculating, designed to make Sarah feel small and insignificant in comparison to her obvious wealth and beauty. "I heard about the failed transfer. Such a shame, but perhaps it's the universe's way of telling you that some things aren't meant to be." The way she delivered this fake sympathy made it clear she was anything but sorry about their disappointment. "You should know that Marcus and I have been discussing reconciliation," Victoria continued, leaning casually against what looked like a brand new BMW that probably cost more than Sarah made in 3 years. "We had our differences, but we've worked through them, and we're planning to announce our engagement again very soon. This whole baby situation is just a temporary detour before we get back to our real life together." Her words hit Sarah like ice water, and she struggled to maintain her composure despite the doubt and hurt that was flooding through her. Was she telling the truth? Had Marcus been planning to reconcile with her all along? The uncertainty was eating away at whatever trust and growing feelings Sarah had been developing for him during their intimate moments together. The next week, as Marcus and Sarah prepared for their second attempt, Sarah was surprised to see an elegant older woman enter the clinic waiting room with the bearing of someone who was accustomed to being the most important person in any room. She was impeccably dressed in what looked like designer clothing worth more than Sarah's car, and she carried herself with the kind of authority that came from decades of wealth and power. Marcus tensed immediately when he saw her, his entire demeanor shifting to something more formal and guarded. "Mother," he said quietly, standing up with obvious reluctance. "I didn't expect to see you here today." So this was the famous Eleanor Thompson, the matriarch who controlled the family empire with an iron fist. Eleanor's sharp gray eyes immediately fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope being examined for flaws and weaknesses. "So you must be Sarah," she said in a voice that was polite but completely devoid of warmth or genuine friendliness. "Marcus has told me so much about you and your arrangement." The way she emphasized the word arrangement made it clear that she viewed Sarah as nothing more than a service provider, hired help to solve a family problem. She looked Sarah up and down with obvious assessment, taking in her modest clothing and nervous demeanor with the calculating gaze of someone who is used to evaluating people based on their usefulness to her family's interests. "I want you to know that I approve of this arrangement," Eleanor continued, settling into the chair across from Sarah with regal composure that commanded attention and respect. "You seem like a sensible young woman who understands the importance of family legacy and the practical nature of this business relationship. The Thompson family needs an heir, and you're providing a valuable service that will be well compensated." Her words were delivered with the efficiency of someone closing a business deal, and Sarah felt her heart sink as the reality of how Eleanor viewed her became crystal clear. To Eleanor Thompson, Sarah wasn't a person with feelings and dreams. She was simply a means to an end, a vessel to carry the precious Thompson bloodline. "I trust you understand that once the child is born, your role in this family will be complete," Eleanor said with the kind of finality that brooked no argument or discussion. "You'll be generously compensated for your service, of course, but it's important that everyone's expectations are clearly defined from the beginning. This baby will be a Thompson, raised with Thompson values and resources, and will have no need for complications in their upbringing." The message was unmistakably clear. Sarah was expected to disappear from their lives once she had served her purpose. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but he didn't contradict his mother or defend Sarah, which hurt more than she wanted to admit. Sarah was beginning to understand that no matter how intimate their moments together felt, she would always be an outsider in his world of wealth and family obligations. The second attempt at embryo transfer felt completely different from the first, charged with a mixture of hope, desperation, and the weight of everything that had happened between Marcus and Sarah over the past few weeks. Dr. Martinez worked with her usual professional precision, but Sarah could sense the underlying tension in the room as they all silently prayed that this time would be different. Marcus held her hand throughout the entire procedure, his grip tighter than necessary, his eyes never leaving her face, as if he could will the embryo to implant through sheer force of determination and desire. The intimacy of the moment felt overwhelming. This wasn't just a medical procedure anymore. It had become something deeply personal and emotional that none of them were prepared to fully acknowledge or discuss openly with complete honesty. Everything went perfectly, Dr. Martinez announced with cautious optimism as she completed the transfer, her professional demeanor softened by genuine hope for their success this time. The embryo looked beautiful under the microscope, and your uterine lining is exactly where we want it to be for optimal implantation. Now comes the hardest part, the waiting period. She explained that they wouldn't know if the procedure had been successful for another 2 weeks, during which time Sarah would need to rest, avoid stress, and let her body do what it was designed to do. Marcus squeezed her hand even tighter, and Sarah could see tears of hope and anxiety glistening in his eyes as he processed the doctor's cautiously encouraging words about their chances this time around. 10 days after the transfer, Dr. Martinez called with news that sent Sarah's heart soaring into the stratosphere and changed everything between Marcus and her forever in ways she couldn't have imagined. "Congratulations, Sarah. Your blood test came back positive. You're officially pregnant." The words seemed to echo in the quiet apartment as Marcus and Sarah stared at each other in stunned disbelief, processing the magnitude of what they had just accomplished together through months of medical procedures and emotional turmoil. For a moment, neither of them could speak or move, overwhelmed by the reality that their journey had finally resulted in the miracle they had been hoping and praying for. Then Marcus let out a whoop of pure joy that Sarah had never heard from him before, his usual composed demeanor completely forgotten in the rush of overwhelming emotion and excitement. Before Sarah could fully process what was happening, Marcus had swept her up in his arms and was spinning her around the small living room, both of them laughing and crying at the same time in a release of months of built-up tension and hope. "We did it, Sarah. We actually did it," he shouted with unbridled happiness, holding her so tightly against his chest that she could feel his heart racing with excitement and pure joy. When he finally set her down, his hands cupped her face with infinite tenderness, and for a moment Sarah thought he was going to kiss her with all the passion and love she could see burning in his eyes. The air between them crackled with electricity and unspoken feelings that threatened to overwhelm both of them completely. But then reality seemed to crash back over him, and he stepped back with obvious reluctance, though his eyes never left hers with obvious longing. Marcus immediately called his private doctor to arrange for the best prenatal care money could buy, his excitement and protective instincts kicking into overdrive as he planned every detail of Sarah's pregnancy with military precision and obvious emotional investment. "I want her to have access to the finest specialists in the city," Sarah heard him saying into the phone, his voice filled with authority, determination, and something that sounded suspiciously like love. "Cost is absolutely no object. I want the best of everything for Sarah and our baby." The way he said "our baby" made Sarah's heart skip several beats, and she found herself studying his face with growing suspicion and hope. This level of emotional investment and possessive care felt far beyond what any business arrangement would require, and she began to wonder if there were feelings he wasn't telling her about. As Sarah watched Marcus continue making arrangements with an intensity that bordered on obsession, A growing suspicion began to take root in her mind about his true motives for this entire arrangement. The way he talked about the baby, the level of care he was showing her, the emotional investment that seemed far too deep for a simple business transaction. None of it added up to the clinical arrangement they had originally discussed. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly when he finished his phone calls, "why does this feel like so much more than business to you? You're acting like—" She paused, afraid to voice what she was thinking. "Like what, Sarah?" he asked, his voice suddenly guarded. "Like you're in love with me, and this baby is your way of keeping me in your life permanently." The words hung between them like a challenge, and Sarah watched his face carefully for any sign of the truth she suspected he was hiding. Marcus's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, guilt, longing, and finally a kind of desperate denial that convinced Sarah she was right about his hidden feelings. "Sarah, that's not. This is about the heir, about my family's expectations." But his protests sounded hollow even to his own ears, and Sarah could see the truth written clearly across his features despite his attempts to maintain the facade of a business arrangement. "You can't look me in the eye and tell me this is just business anymore, Marcus. Not after everything that's happened between us. Not after the way you've been taking care of me." Sarah stood up and moved closer to him, studying his face with new understanding. "How long have you been in love with me? And don't lie to me. I deserve to know the truth about what I've gotten myself into." While Marcus and Sarah were navigating the emotional minefield of their relationship, Victoria was busy launching her campaign of destruction from her luxury penthouse across town. She had spent the past week making strategic phone calls to everyone in their social circle, spreading carefully crafted rumors designed to humiliate Sarah and undermine her relationship with Marcus. "Did you hear about Marcus Thompson's little arrangement?" she would say with false concern to their mutual friends. "He's hired some desperate teacher to be his baby mama, basically a high-class prostitute masquerading as a surrogate. It's absolutely scandalous how low some people will sink for money." Her words were calculated to paint Sarah as a gold digger and Marcus as a fool, poisoning their social circle against both of them with malicious efficiency. The first sign that Victoria's campaign was working came when Sarah's sister Emma called her in tears, having heard the rumors from someone in her gym whose husband worked with Marcus. "Sarah, people are saying terrible things about you. They're calling you a surrogate, but they're making it sound like you're selling yourself for money." Sarah's heart sank as she realized that Victoria had managed to twist their private arrangement into something sordid and shameful in the public eye. "They're saying you're just a desperate woman who got pregnant by a rich man for his money, and that you're going to try to trap him into marriage. Some people are even suggesting that you're not really pregnant, that it's all some elaborate scheme to get access to his fortune." The cruelty of the rumors left Sarah feeling exposed and vulnerable in ways she had never experienced before. When Sarah confronted Marcus about the rumors that were spreading through his social circle like wildfire, his reaction told her everything she needed to know about how seriously this was affecting his reputation and business relationships. "Victoria is behind this, isn't she?" Sarah demanded, watching his face carefully for confirmation of what she already suspected. "She's telling everyone that I'm your paid surrogate, that I'm some kind of gold digger who's using this pregnancy to trap you into a relationship." Marcus ran his hands through his hair in frustration, his usual composure completely shattered. "I'll handle Victoria and her lies, Sarah. Don't let her poison your mind against what we're building together." But Sarah could see the strain in his eyes, the pressure he was feeling from his family and business associates who were questioning his judgment and reputation. "Is that what I am to you, Marcus? A mistake that's damaging your precious reputation? Because if that's how you really feel, then maybe Victoria is right about everything." 3 months into her pregnancy, Marcus had insisted on moving Sarah into a beautiful penthouse apartment in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, claiming it was for her health and safety during this crucial time. "You need proper security and better medical facilities nearby," he explained as he helped her settle into the spacious living room that was bigger than her entire previous apartment. But his level of involvement in every detail of her daily life felt far beyond what any business arrangement would require. He had personally selected every piece of furniture, every painting on the walls, even the specific thread count of sheets on her bed. The apartment felt like a luxurious prison designed by someone who was either deeply in love with her or completely obsessed with controlling every aspect of her pregnancy experience for reasons he wouldn't explain. The contrast between Sarah's old life and this new reality was overwhelming and sometimes surreal, like stepping into a fairy tale that she wasn't sure she belonged in or deserved to experience. Everything was pristine, expensive, and chosen with impeccable taste, from the Italian marble countertops to the designer baby grand piano that Marcus remembered she had always dreamed of learning to play. "This is all temporary, right?" Sarah asked him one evening as they sat on the terrace, overlooking the glittering city lights spread out below them like a carpet of stars. "Once the baby is born, I'll go back to my normal life." But the way he avoided her eyes and changed the subject made her suspect that he had very different long-term plans that he wasn't ready to discuss with her yet for reasons she couldn't understand. Marcus had hired the best private physicians money could buy to monitor Sarah's pregnancy, bringing them to the apartment for weekly checkups to ensure that she received the finest medical care available in the city. "Dr. Williams is one of the top obstetricians in the country," he explained as he introduced her to yet another specialist who would be joining her medical team. "I want you to have access to every possible resource and expertise during this pregnancy." The level of medical attention felt overwhelming and far beyond what was necessary for a normal, healthy pregnancy, but Marcus insisted that nothing was too expensive or excessive when it came to her well-being and the baby's development. Sometimes Sarah felt like a precious scientific experiment being monitored by an army of experts who reported every detail back to Marcus as if he were conducting some kind of elaborate research project. One afternoon while Marcus was at work, Sarah was exploring the study when she accidentally discovered a hidden drawer in the antique desk that contained dozens of letters written in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. Her hands trembled as she realized they were all addressed to her, dating back over the past 5 years, but none of them had ever been sent or delivered. "My dearest Sarah," one began, "I watched you teaching your students today through the classroom window, and my heart ached with how much I love you and how impossible it feels to tell you the truth about my feelings." Letter after letter revealed years of secret longing, careful observation of her life from a distance, and desperate wishes that he could find the courage to confess his love. The depth of emotion in these private confessions took Sarah's breath away and shattered every assumption she had made about their relationship and his motives. As Sarah read through more of the unsent letters, the true scope of Marcus's feelings became overwhelmingly clear, and she felt her own emotions spiraling into confusion and something that might have been love or understanding. "I know you see me as just your friend," another letter read, "but I dream about a life where I could hold you every morning and tell you how beautiful you are, where I could be the man who makes you laugh and wipes away your tears." The letters revealed that he had been in love with her for years, long before their arrangement began, and that Victoria had been right about his motives. The baby was his desperate attempt to have her in his life permanently. The beautiful handwriting and heartfelt confessions painted a picture of a man who had been suffering in silence, watching her from afar and loving her with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. Marcus walked into the study at that moment and froze when he saw Sarah surrounded by his private letters, his face going completely pale as he realized that all his carefully guarded secrets had been exposed without his permission or preparation. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp with panic and something that sounded like fear as he rushed forward to gather up the scattered letters. "Those are private papers. You had no right to go through my personal belongings like that." But it was too late. Sarah had already read enough to understand the truth about his feelings, and there was no way to unsee the desperate love and longing that had been poured onto those pages over years of secret suffering. The vulnerable, romantic man revealed in those letters was completely different from the composed businessman sitting across from her now. "How long, Marcus?" Sarah demanded, holding up one of the letters as evidence of his deception and hidden motives for their entire arrangement. "How long have you been in love with me? Because these letters make it very clear that this baby isn't about your family's business at all. It's about you wanting me in your life permanently." She watched his face carefully for any sign of the truth, but he had already shifted into defensive mode, his features hardening into the cold mask he wore when conducting difficult business negotiations. And don't you dare lie to me again, because I've read enough of these to know exactly how you really feel about me and what this arrangement really means to you. The confrontation felt like a dam bursting, releasing months of suspicion and growing feelings that neither of them had been brave enough to address directly until this moment. "Sarah, you're completely misinterpreting what you found," Marcus said firmly, his voice taking on the cold, professional tone he used in boardroom meetings when he needed to maintain control of a difficult situation. "Those letters are old, meaningless ramblings from a time when I was confused about my feelings and the boundaries of our friendship. They don't represent how I feel now or what this arrangement means to either of us." But Sarah could see the lies in his eyes, the desperate way he was trying to rebuild the walls between them that the letters had torn down. "This pregnancy is exactly what we agreed it would be, a business arrangement that benefits both of us. Nothing more, nothing less. I need an heir, you needed financial security, and we're both getting what we wanted from this deal." "Business arrangement?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising with hurt and anger as she held up another letter that contradicted everything he was saying. "Marcus, I just read 5 years' worth of love letters where you poured your heart out about wanting to marry me and spend your life with me. You wrote about watching me from across the street, about memorizing my schedule so you could accidentally run into me, about buying this apartment because you dreamed of me living here with you someday." The evidence was overwhelming, but he was still trying to deny the obvious truth that was written in his own handwriting. "You can't look me in the eye and tell me this is just business when you've been orchestrating every detail of my life for months like some elaborate romantic fantasy you're trying to make come true." Marcus turned away from Sarah, unable to maintain eye contact while continuing his denial, but his voice remained stubbornly firm despite the emotional turmoil she could see in his posture. "You're reading too much into old letters that don't mean anything anymore, Sarah. I won't let you complicate our arrangement with romantic fantasies that will only hurt both of us in the end." He began gathering up the remaining letters with mechanical efficiency, as if destroying the evidence could somehow erase the truth they revealed. "We have a contract, we have clear expectations, and we both need to stick to the professional boundaries we established from the beginning. Anything else would be a mistake that could ruin everything we've worked for." But as he spoke, Sarah could see his hands shaking and the way he avoided looking at her directly, confirming that every word in those letters was true and that his denial was just another form of protection for both of them. 2 days after Sarah's confrontation with Marcus about the letters, Victoria requested a private meeting with her in an exclusive cafe downtown, claiming she had important information that Sarah needed to hear for her own protection and well-being. Sarah almost didn't go, but curiosity and a growing sense that there were still secrets being kept from her convinced her to meet with Victoria despite her better judgment and Marcus's warnings about her manipulative nature. Victoria looked absolutely stunning as always, dressed in designer clothing that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her blonde hair perfectly styled and her green eyes glittering with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she held all the cards in whatever game she was playing. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but carried the promise of revelations that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about her situation. "What I'm about to tell you will probably hurt, but you deserve to know the truth about Marcus and his real motives for this whole arrangement." Victoria began, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering devastating news with false sympathy and barely concealed satisfaction. "You see, Sarah, Marcus has been in love with you for years, absolutely obsessed with you, actually. This entire baby arrangement isn't about his family's business needs or producing an heir for practical reasons." She paused to let this information sink in, watching Sarah's face carefully for any reaction that would confirm her words were having the desired effect of shattering her understanding of everything. "This baby is Marcus's desperate, pathetic attempt to trap you in his life permanently, because he knows you would never choose to be with him willingly. He's using your financial desperation to manipulate you into a situation where you'll be tied to him forever through this child." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow, and she felt her world tilting on its axis as Victoria's words confirmed the growing suspicions she had been trying to suppress for weeks now. "That's not true," Sarah whispered, but even as she said the words, every intimate moment Marcus and she had shared began taking on a sinister new meaning in her mind. "Marcus isn't like that. He wouldn't manipulate me that way, just because he has feelings he can't express properly." But Victoria's cold smile told her that she was absolutely certain of her facts, and Sarah's heart began breaking as she realized how thoroughly she might have been deceived by someone she trusted completely. Think about it, Sarah. The timing, the excessive care, the way he looks at you like you're his entire world. None of that is normal behavior for a simple business arrangement. He's orchestrating an elaborate fantasy where he gets to play house with the woman he's been obsessing over for years. "I thought you might not believe me, so I brought proof," Victoria said with obvious satisfaction, pulling out her phone and scrolling through what appeared to be screenshots of text messages and emails between her and Marcus. "These are conversations Marcus and I had just last month, where he admitted that he's been in love with you since college and that this pregnancy is his way of making sure you can never leave his life completely." Sarah's hands trembled as she read messages that seemed to confirm Victoria's claims. Marcus discussing his feelings for her, his plans to use the baby arrangement to keep her close, his desperate hope that she might eventually return his feelings if he could just find a way to make her need him. Now do you understand why he chose you specifically? Why he was willing to pay you so much money? You weren't helping a friend in need. You were walking directly into an elaborate trap designed by a man who couldn't accept that you might never love him back. As Sarah read through the messages Victoria showed her, every romantic moment Marcus and she had shared over the past months transformed into calculated manipulation in her mind, and she felt like the biggest fool who had ever lived. The coffee and pastries he brought her, the way he remembered her favorite things, the gentle touches and tender looks. All of it had been part of an elaborate performance designed to make her fall in love with him while she was vulnerable and dependent on his generosity. "He made me believe that this was becoming something real between us," Sarah said quietly, her voice breaking with the weight of her own stupidity and naivety about his true intentions. "I actually started to think that maybe we could have a future together, that maybe the feelings I was developing weren't one-sided after all." Victoria reached across the table and patted Sarah's hand with false sympathy that felt like salt being poured into an open wound. "Oh, darling, the feelings were never one-sided. Marcus has been in love with you for years. That's exactly the problem. He's using that love to manipulate and control you. The most pathetic part is that Marcus actually believes this scheme will work," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with disdain and cruel amusement at what she clearly saw as his romantic delusions. "He thinks that once you have his baby, you'll magically fall in love with him and want to play happy family forever in that ridiculously expensive apartment he's provided for you. He's living in a fantasy where love can be purchased and manipulated into existence through grand gestures and financial dependency." She leaned closer, her green eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. "But you're smarter than that, aren't you, Sarah? You can see through his pathetic attempts to buy your affection and trap you in a relationship you never actually chose to be in. The question is, what are you going to do about it now that you know the truth about his real motives and intentions?" Sarah stood up abruptly from the cafe table, her chair scraping against the floor as rage and betrayal coursed through her veins like fire, making it impossible to sit still for another second. "I need to confront Marcus about this immediately," she said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt that she could barely contain or control properly. "I need to hear him admit what he's really been doing to me, what this arrangement has really been about from the very beginning." Victoria smiled with obvious satisfaction, clearly pleased that her revelations had achieved exactly the reaction she had been hoping for when she orchestrated this meeting. "Just remember, Sarah, that men like Marcus are very good at making excuses and justifying their behavior when they're caught in their lies. Don't let him convince you that his manipulation was somehow romantic or well-intentioned. What he's done to you is a violation of trust that can never be forgiven or forgotten, no matter how prettily he tries to explain away." When Sarah stormed into the penthouse, Marcus was sitting in his favorite chair reading a business magazine, looking completely relaxed and innocent, as if he hadn't been orchestrating an elaborate emotional manipulation for months. "Marcus, we need to talk right now," Sarah announced, her voice cutting through the peaceful evening atmosphere like a knife. The legal documents and phone screenshots felt like weapons in her purse, concrete proof of his deception that she was ready to use against him. "I know the truth about why you really asked me to have your baby. I know about your feelings for me, about your plan to use this child to trap me in your life permanently." The shock and guilt that flashed across his face confirmed everything Victoria had told her. But instead of the relief Sarah expected to feel at finally knowing the truth, she felt only rage and heartbreak at how thoroughly he had betrayed her trust and friendship. Marcus stood up slowly, his magazine falling to the floor as he processed Sarah's accusation and realized that his carefully constructed deception was finally crumbling around him. "Sarah, please let me explain," he began, his voice filled with desperation and something that looked like genuine panic at the thought of losing her. "Yes, I have feelings for you. Yes, I've been in love with you for longer than I should admit. But that doesn't mean—" He paused, clearly struggling with whether to continue his denials or finally tell her the complete truth about his motives and intentions. "That doesn't mean that's the only reason I asked you to do this. I do need an heir. My family does have expectations, and you did need the money. Those things are all true, even if my feelings complicated everything in ways I never intended or planned for." But his explanation sounded hollow and rehearsed, like he had been preparing for this confrontation and still couldn't find a way to make his behavior seem acceptable or justified. "Complicated? You call manipulating someone you claim to love complicated?" Sarah shouted, her voice echoing through the expensive apartment as months of suppressed doubts and growing feelings transformed into pure fury. "Marcus, you used my desperation against me. You took advantage of my father's illness and my financial problems to trick me into a situation where I would be emotionally vulnerable and dependent on you." She pulled the phone screenshots from her purse and threw them at him, watching as the evidence of his deception scattered across the marble floor between them. "You planned this entire thing to trap me, to make me fall in love with you, because you were too cowardly to just tell me how you felt and risk honest rejection." Sarah's hands moved protectively to her growing belly as the full scope of his betrayal hit her. "I'm done with this arrangement, Marcus. I'm going to pay you back every penny and raise this child on my own, away from your lies and manipulation. I won't be your prisoner anymore." The next morning, Sarah began packing her belongings with a determination that surprised her with its clarity and strength, finally ready to reclaim control over her life and her future completely. Every designer outfit Marcus had bought her, every expensive item he had provided for her comfort, she left it all behind, taking only the clothes and personal items that had belonged to her before this nightmare began. "I won't be a prisoner in a golden cage anymore," she whispered to herself as she folded her modest teacher clothes that represented the authentic life she had temporarily abandoned for his luxury. The apartment that had felt like a fairy tale now felt like a beautiful trap designed to keep her dependent and grateful, and she couldn't wait to escape its suffocating perfection forever. Her hands moved protectively over her growing belly as she promised her unborn child that they would build a life based on honesty and genuine love, not manipulation and financial dependency that came with impossible strings attached. Sarah bought a bus ticket to Portland, Oregon, a city far enough away that Marcus would have difficulty finding her, but close enough to affordable health care and job opportunities that she could manage as a single mother. The decision to leave everything familiar behind was terrifying, but staying would have meant continuing to live a lie that was poisoning everything beautiful about her pregnancy and impending motherhood. As the bus pulled away from the station, Sarah watched the city skyline disappear and felt a mixture of fear and liberation wash over her in equal measure. "We're starting over, little one," she whispered to her belly. "And this time we're going to build something real and honest, even if it's not easy or comfortable or guaranteed." The unknown future ahead felt less frightening than the gilded cage she was leaving behind, where love came with conditions, and every kindness had hidden motives that made genuine happiness impossible. Portland welcomed Sarah with its quirky charm and affordable neighborhoods, where she could disappear into anonymity while building a new life for herself and her child. She found a small but clean apartment in a working-class neighborhood. Nothing like the luxury she had grown accustomed to, but it felt like freedom in ways that money couldn't buy or replicate. The elderly landlady, Mrs. Chun, asked no questions about Sarah's situation and seemed genuinely pleased to have a quiet, responsible tenant who paid her rent on time and didn't cause any trouble for the other residents. "Fresh starts are good for the soul," she said with a knowing smile that suggested she understood something about running away from complicated pasts. For the first time in months, Sarah could breathe freely without feeling like every gesture of kindness came with strings attached or hidden agendas that would eventually be used against her. Meanwhile, Marcus had discovered Sarah's disappearance and was frantically hiring private investigators to track down any trace of where she might have gone, calling in every favor and resource his wealth could command. "I don't care what it costs," he told the detective agency with desperation that bordered on obsession. "Find her. Find Sarah Johnson. She's pregnant with my child, and she's somewhere out there thinking I don't love her enough to fight for our future together." But Sarah had been careful to leave no digital trail, paying for everything in cash and avoiding credit cards or bank transactions that could be traced back to her new location. The woman who had been Sarah Johnson in his world had effectively vanished, replaced by someone who was determined to build a life on her own terms without the complications of wealth, manipulation, or love that came with impossible conditions attached to every beautiful moment. Eleanor Thompson was absolutely livid when she learned that Sarah had disappeared completely, taking her future grandchild with her and potentially destroying years of careful family planning and business strategy. "This is a disaster, Marcus," she raged, pacing her office like a caged animal who had been denied her prey. "That girl has stolen our heir and vanished without a trace. We need to take legal action immediately, hire the best lawyers money can buy, and force her to return through the courts if necessary." She began making phone calls to family attorneys who specialized in custody cases and parental rights, determined to use every legal weapon at her disposal to bring Sarah back into their control. "I don't care if she thinks she's protecting that child from us. The Thompson family has rights, and I will not allow some schoolteacher with delusions of independence to destroy our legacy because she got her feelings hurt by the truth about Marcus's motives." But Marcus refused to authorize any legal action against Sarah, despite his mother's increasingly frantic demands for aggressive measures to secure their family's future and his child's inheritance. "I won't force Sarah to come back through legal threats and court orders, Mother," he said with quiet determination that surprised Eleanor with its firmness. She left because she felt betrayed and manipulated, and dragging her through a custody battle will only prove that she was right about my methods and motives. He stared out the office window at the city where Sarah had once lived, his heart breaking a little more each day as he realized the full scope of what his deception had cost both of them. "If Sarah ever comes back to me, it has to be because she chooses to, because she believes that what we could have together is worth fighting for. Anything else would just be another form of manipulation, and I've already lost her trust once through my own cowardice and dishonesty." Victoria, sensing an opportunity to finally eliminate Sarah from Marcus's life permanently, began making subtle inquiries about her whereabouts under the guise of concern for her well-being and the baby's health. She called Sarah's old school, spoke to former colleagues, and even contacted her sister Emma with offers of help and support that seemed genuine on the surface. "I'm so worried about Sarah," she told Emma, with perfectly performed sympathy. "She's pregnant and alone somewhere, and I feel terrible about the argument we had before she left. If you hear from her, please let me know. I just want to make sure she's getting proper medical care and has everything she needs." But Emma, who had never trusted Victoria and knew the real story behind Sarah's disappearance, gave her no information and immediately called to warn Sarah that Marcus's ex-fiancée was actively trying to track her down for reasons that were definitely not benevolent or supportive. When her direct approach failed to yield results, Victoria hired her own private investigator to find Sarah, claiming she wanted to help, but actually hoping to discover her location so she could either convince her never to return or find ways to make her new life difficult enough that she would give up and disappear permanently. "I need to know where Sarah Johnson went and what she's doing to support herself," she told the detective with cold efficiency. "She's carrying Marcus Thompson's child, and there are family interests that need to be protected, even if she doesn't understand the bigger picture of what's at stake." Victoria's plan was to either buy Sarah off with enough money to start a new life far away from Marcus, or to create enough problems in her new situation that she would be forced to return to his protection and control. Either outcome would serve her purposes of eliminating Sarah as competition for Marcus's attention and affection, clearing the way for her to reclaim the life she believed she deserved. Sarah found work as a waitress at a small diner in Portland. The tips barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but the honest work felt more satisfying than all the luxury Marcus's money had provided. Her pregnancy was showing now, and her coworkers were kind and supportive without asking too many questions about her past or the father of her child. "You're doing great, honey," said Dolores, the head waitress who had taken Sarah under her wing like a protective mother hen. "Single moms have to be strong, and you've got that strength in spades. That baby is lucky to have you." The simple validation from someone who knew nothing about her complicated history felt more genuine than all of Marcus's elaborate gestures and expensive gifts. Each day that passed made Sarah more confident that she had made the right choice, even though she missed him terribly and sometimes wondered if his love, however flawed, might have been worth the cost of her independence and self-respect. That evening, as Sarah sat in her small Portland apartment looking at the latest ultrasound photo of her growing baby, she felt the child moving inside her and realized that soon she would have to make decisions about whether Marcus should be part of their lives at all. The baby deserved to know their father, but they also deserved to grow up in an environment of honesty and genuine love rather than manipulation and conditional affection that came with impossible strings attached. "Your daddy loves us both very much," she whispered to her belly. "But sometimes love isn't enough when it's built on lies and deception. Someday, when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you the whole story and let you decide for yourself whether his love was worth the pain it caused both of us." The photo blurred through her tears as she realized that no matter how far she ran or how much she tried to protect herself and her child, Marcus would always be part of their story, and eventually she would have to decide whether that was a blessing or a curse that would follow them forever. At 7 months pregnant, Sarah was working a late shift at the diner when sudden, sharp pains in her abdomen sent her doubling over in agony that felt like nothing she had ever experienced before in her entire life. "Something's wrong," she gasped to Dolores, who immediately called 911 while helping her to a chair as the contractions grew stronger and more frequent with each passing minute that felt like an eternity. The ambulance ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens, medical equipment, and paramedics asking questions she could barely answer through the pain that was consuming her entire body and mind. "It's too early," Sarah kept repeating, her hands protectively covering her belly as fear overwhelmed every other emotion she was capable of feeling. "The baby isn't supposed to come yet. Please, someone help us. I can't lose this baby after everything we've been through together." The thought of losing her child now, when she had sacrificed so much to protect them both, was more terrifying than any physical pain the premature labor could inflict. The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos as doctors and nurses worked to assess Sarah's condition and determine the best course of action for both her and her premature baby, who was determined to enter the world months ahead of schedule. "We need to get her to labor and delivery immediately," the attending physician announced after a quick examination that confirmed her worst fears about the complications they were facing. "The baby is coming whether we're ready or not, and we need to be prepared for potential complications given the early gestational age and the mother's stress levels." Through the haze of pain and medication, Sarah realized that she was completely alone in this crisis, with no family nearby and no one to hold her hand or tell her that everything would be okay. The nurses were professional and kind, but they couldn't fill the emotional void left by her decision to cut all ties with the people who had once been her support system during difficult times. However, the hospital staff had found Sarah's emergency contact information in her wallet, and despite her protests, they felt obligated to notify Marcus as the father of the child who was about to be born prematurely in a city hundreds of miles away from where he expected them to be living. "Mr. Thompson, this is Portland General Hospital," the nurse explained during what must have been the most shocking phone call of Marcus's entire life. "Sarah Johnson has been admitted in premature labor, and we're required to notify you as the father listed in her emergency contacts." The pause on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity before Marcus's voice came through, shaky with emotion and barely controlled panic that was evident even through the phone connection. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay? I'm coming immediately. Don't let anything happen to them before I get there. Please, just keep them safe until I can be there with them both." Marcus chartered a private jet the moment he hung up the phone and arrived at Portland General Hospital looking like a man who had been through hell, still wearing his expensive business suit, but completely disheveled and panic-stricken as he demanded directions to where Sarah was fighting to bring their child safely into the world. "Sarah Johnson, where is she? I'm the father of her baby," he announced to every nurse and doctor he encountered, his usual composed demeanor completely shattered by fear and desperate love that he could no longer hide or deny to anyone. The hospital staff quickly directed him to the delivery floor, where they informed him that Sarah was in active labor with complications that required immediate medical intervention and support. "Can I see her? Can I be with her during this?" he asked with fierce determination that surprised the medical staff with its intensity. "She needs to know that she's not alone, that someone who loves her is here to help her through this." The labor was difficult and frightening, with complications that required constant monitoring and intervention from a team of specialists who worked tirelessly to ensure both Sarah's safety and the baby's survival during the traumatic premature delivery. "You're doing great, Sarah," the doctor encouraged her during a particularly difficult contraction that left her gasping for breath and wondering if she had the strength to continue fighting for both of them. "The baby's heart rate is concerning, and we need you to push harder during the next contraction. We're almost there, but we need your help to get this baby out safely." Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, Sarah heard a familiar voice in the hallway outside her room, and her heart nearly stopped as she realized that Marcus had somehow found her and was demanding to be allowed into the delivery room to be with them during this crisis that threatened everything she had been trying to protect. "Please let me in," Marcus begged the medical staff with tears streaming down his face as he watched Sarah struggle through another contraction that seemed to go on forever. "She shouldn't have to go through this alone. I know she's angry with me. I know I hurt her, but right now she needs someone who loves her to be here with her." The doctor looked at Sarah questioningly, and despite everything that had happened between them, she nodded because she realized that she needed Marcus more than she needed her pride or her anger about his deception and manipulation. "Sarah," Marcus whispered as he rushed to her bedside and took her hand in both of his touch immediately providing comfort that she hadn't realized she was desperately craving. "I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this together, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for every lie I told you and every mistake I made." As another contraction gripped Sarah's body with unbearable intensity, Marcus leaned closer and began speaking with desperate honesty that cut through her pain like a lifeline she hadn't known she needed so desperately. "Sarah, I have to tell you the truth about everything right now because I can't let you go through this thinking that any of this was just business or manipulation." His voice was shaking with emotion and fear as he continued. "I've been in love with you since we were in college together. Every day, for years, I watched you from afar and wished I had the courage to tell you how I felt about you and what you meant to my entire existence." Sarah squeezed his hand during the peak of her contraction, and he continued his confession without pause. "The air, the family business, all of that. I made it up as an excuse to have you in my life because I was too much of a coward to simply tell you that I loved you and ask if you could ever love me back the same way." "What do you mean you made up?" Sarah gasped between contractions, her physical pain momentarily overshadowed by the emotional earthquake of his confession that was rewriting everything she thought she knew about their situation. "Marcus, Are you telling me that you don't actually need an heir for your inheritance? That this whole arrangement was just an elaborate lie to get me pregnant with your child? The betrayal felt even deeper than Victoria's revelations had, because this meant that every aspect of their relationship had been built on deception from the very beginning. I can't believe you would do that to me, that you would use my desperation and my father's illness to manipulate me into something so fundamental and life-changing. But even as she spoke the words, she could see the genuine anguish in his eyes and the way his hands trembled as he continued to hold hers through the worst pain of her life. I know how terrible that sounds, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Marcus continued through his tears, his voice breaking with the weight of years of deception that he was finally releasing. But Sarah, I couldn't live without you in my life anymore. I tried for years to forget about you, to move on, to marry Victoria like my family wanted, but every day without you felt like dying a little bit more. Another contraction hit Sarah, and he helped her breathe through it while continuing his desperate confession. When I learned about your father's medical bills and your financial problems, I saw an opportunity to help you while also giving myself a chance to be close to you, to take care of you, to maybe make you fall in love with me the way I've been in love with you for over a decade. His honesty was devastating and beautiful at the same time, confirming her worst fears about his manipulation while also revealing a depth of love that she had never imagined possible. As the final contraction built to its peak and the doctor told Sarah to push with everything she had left, she looked into Marcus's eyes and saw not the manipulative businessman who had deceived her, but the broken man who had loved her so desperately that he had created an elaborate fantasy just to have her in his life. I love you too, Marcus, Sarah whispered through her exhaustion and pain, finally admitting to both of them what she had been feeling for months but was too hurt and confused to acknowledge. I fell in love with you during this crazy journey, even though I tried so hard to protect my heart from exactly this kind of pain and complication. And then their baby's cry filled the room, strong and healthy despite her early arrival. And Marcus and Sarah looked at each other with tears streaming down their faces as they realized that their love had created something beautiful and perfect despite all the lies and mistakes that had brought them to this moment. She's ours, Marcus whispered in wonder. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that my love for you is real, even if the way I showed it was wrong. The next morning, as they sat together in Sarah's hospital room holding their beautiful daughter Emma Rose, the weight of everything that had happened between them seemed to transform into something lighter and more hopeful than either of them had dared to imagine possible. She's perfect, Marcus whispered, his voice filled with wonder as he gently touched her tiny fingers that were wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. Sarah, I know I don't deserve this second chance after everything I put you through, but I want you to know that I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that my love for you and Emma is real and honest. Sarah looked at him holding their daughter with such tender care and protectiveness, and she realized that the man she had fallen in love with during their complicated journey was finally revealing himself without walls or deception. We have a lot to talk about, Marcus, she said softly, but right now I just want to enjoy this moment with our family and figure out how to move forward together. Sarah, I need you to understand something important before we make any decisions about our future together, Marcus said with the kind of vulnerability she had never seen from him before, his usual confidence replaced by genuine humility and fear. I'm renouncing any claim to control over you or Emma through money or legal arrangements. I've already had my lawyers draw up documents that give you complete custody and decision-making power over our daughter's life and upbringing. He pulled out legal papers from his briefcase that he had somehow managed to bring to the hospital during his frantic rush to be with them. The money, the apartment, everything I provided, consider it a gift with no strings attached. If you want me in your lives, it has to be because you choose to have me there, not because you feel obligated or trapped by financial dependency. His offer was everything Sarah had wanted to hear months ago, but now it felt almost unnecessary because she could see the sincerity in his eyes and feel the genuine love in his every gesture. As Sarah read through the legal documents Marcus had prepared, she was amazed by their thoroughness and the way they protected her rights and Emma's future without giving him any leverage or control over their decisions. "You're giving up everything," she said in disbelief, looking up from papers that essentially made her a millionaire with no obligations to him whatsoever. "The money, your parental rights, any legal claim to Emma's custody. Marcus, this gives you nothing and gives me everything. Why would you do this when you've spent so much time and energy trying to keep us in your life?" He smiled with a sadness that broke her heart, reaching over to stroke Emma's soft hair as she slept peacefully between them. "Because I love you both more than I love controlling the situation or protecting myself from potential loss. I would rather have you choose to be with me freely, even if it means risking that you might choose to walk away forever, than have you stay because you feel trapped or obligated by circumstances I created." Their peaceful moment was interrupted when Victoria somehow discovered which hospital they were at and appeared in Sarah's doorway, like a storm cloud threatening to destroy the fragile happiness they were building together. "Well, isn't this a touching scene?" she said with barely concealed venom as she took in the sight of Marcus and Sarah sitting together with their newborn daughter like a real family. "Marcus, I've been calling you for hours. Your mother is beside herself with worry, and here you are playing house with your little teacher and her baby." The possessive way she referred to Emma as her baby instead of your baby made it clear that Victoria still didn't accept the reality of their situation or Marcus's feelings for them. "I think it's time you came home and remembered where you actually belong, don't you? This fantasy has gone on long enough, and it's time to face reality about your responsibilities to your real family and your social obligations." Marcus stood up with a quiet strength that Sarah had never seen from him before, positioning himself between Victoria and their family with clear protective intent that left no doubt about his priorities or loyalties. "Victoria, you need to leave immediately and never contact any of us again," he said with calm authority that was more intimidating than any angry outburst could have been. "Sarah and Emma are my family now, and I will not tolerate anyone who threatens their peace or tries to interfere with our happiness together." Victoria's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, revealing the desperate fury beneath her cultivated elegance as she realized that she had truly lost him forever to someone she considered beneath her social status. "You're making a huge mistake, Marcus. You're throwing away everything we built together, everything your family expects from you, for a woman who will never fit into your world or understand the responsibilities that come with your position." But Marcus just shook his head with finality that made her arguments sound hollow and irrelevant. "Fine," Victoria said with cold fury as she realized that her presence was unwelcome and that Marcus would never change his mind about choosing Sarah over her and their shared social circle. "But don't come crawling back to me when you realize what you've given up for this little domestic fantasy. Don't expect me to be waiting when you discover that love isn't enough to bridge the gap between your worlds." She looked directly at Sarah with eyes full of hatred and promised revenge that sent chills down her spine. "And you, Sarah, don't think this is over just because you managed to trap him with a baby. Men like Marcus eventually get bored with playing house, and when he does, you'll be left with nothing but a child you can't afford to raise properly in the lifestyle he'll expect." Her words were designed to plant seeds of doubt and insecurity that would grow over time. But as Sarah looked at Marcus holding their daughter and heard him gently but firmly ask hospital security to escort Victoria from the building, she knew that her threats were empty and desperate. Later that day, Eleanor Thompson called to speak with Marcus via video conference, her stern face filling the laptop screen with the kind of imperial displeasure that had probably terrified him since childhood. "Marcus, I understand that you've had a child with that teacher, and while I'm not pleased with the circumstances, I suppose we must make the best of this situation for the family's sake." Her tone suggested that she was granting them some kind of royal pardon rather than accepting her son's choices about his own life and happiness. "However, I expect that you will handle this matter properly. The child will need to be raised with appropriate education and social connections, and Sarah will need to understand her place in our family structure if she expects to be part of Marcus's life permanently." Sarah felt her temper rising at Eleanor's condescending tone and presumptuous demands. But Marcus surprised her by interrupting his mother with unprecedented firmness and clarity about his priorities. "Mother, I need you to understand something very clearly," Marcus said with a strength and independence that obviously shocked Eleanor based on her surprised expression on the screen. "Sarah and Emma are my family now, and they will be treated with the respect and love they deserve, not as social projects to be managed or controlled by family expectations." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "If you want to be part of our lives and have a relationship with your granddaughter, you will treat Sarah as the woman I love and plan to marry, not as some temporary inconvenience to be tolerated." Eleanor's face went through several expressions of shock and indignation as she processed her son's unprecedented defiance of her authority and social expectations. "Furthermore, Sarah and I will raise Emma according to our values and our choices, not according to some outdated notion of social obligation or family tradition that puts status above love and genuine happiness." As Sarah listened to Marcus defend their family and their right to build a life based on love rather than social expectations or family pressure, she felt her heart filling with a kind of joy and security that she had never experienced before in any relationship. "Did you just tell your mother that you plan to marry me?" she asked with a smile that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds that had been hanging over them for months. "Because I don't remember you actually asking me that question, Mr. Thompson." Marcus laughed with pure happiness as he turned from the laptop where his mother was still sputtering about proper procedures and family protocols, and he took Sarah's hands in his with the kind of tenderness that made her believe in fairy tale endings despite everything they had been through together. "Sarah Johnson," he said with love shining in his eyes, "I know I did everything backwards and made every possible mistake along the way. But will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that real love is worth more than any amount of money or social status?" "Yes," Sarah whispered through happy tears as Emma stirred in her bassinet and made the soft sounds that told them she was ready to eat and be held by her parents, who had finally found their way to each other through all the lies and misunderstandings that had nearly destroyed their chance at happiness. "Yes, Marcus, I'll marry you, but only if you promise that from now on we build our life together on complete honesty and trust, no matter how difficult the truth might be to share or accept." As he kissed her with all the love and passion that had been growing between them for months, Sarah realized that their story hadn't been about a business arrangement or a desperate scheme to solve financial problems. It had been about two people who were brave enough to fight for love, even when it seemed impossible. And now, as they held their beautiful daughter and planned their future as a real family, she knew that the best chapters of their story were still waiting to be written together. "Welcome to our family, Emma Rose," Sarah whispered to their sleeping daughter. "Your parents love each other and love you more than anything else in this world, and that's all any of us will ever need to be truly happy." Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments what you thought of this incredible love story. And don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more amazing stories about love conquering all.